Hi kids, welcome to Miss Nancy's Bible College for Kids. Today's lesson is different. It's the giant and the lad, and it's Old Testament in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoh, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shochoh and Azekah in Ephesdammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. So they're fixing to go to battle. They go down like this in between them. Let's see what happens. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. So he was like 9 feet something tall. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with the coat of mail, and the weight of that coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. Brass is one heavy metal. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, another heavy metal. And one bearing a shield went before him. I would think if I was that big, bad, and tough, I wouldn't have to have somebody to go before me to bear a shield to protect me. But anyway, he stood and he cried unto the armies of Israel. And here's what he said unto them, kids. Why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. Now Saul was king during this time. If he be able to fight with me, and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him, and kill him, then shall ye be our servants, and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard the words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. And he had 8 sons. And the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. He was respected. They listened to him. He had some pull. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, the oldest, and next unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. So they went to war, and here's what David did, the youngest one. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening, and presented himself 40 days. So that makes 80 times that he had come down and was threatening and breathing threats to him and stuff. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000. And look how the brethren fare, and take their pledge. Meaning, see how they're doing, come back and let me know. And Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to fight, and shouted for the battle. He was seeing it come down. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of a keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and was sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? He didn't have much respect for David. I know thy pride and thy naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I done now? Or what have I now done, actually? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward that other, and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. In other words, he was saying, Now what's going to be done to this guy that beats this giant? And they were saying they're going to be rich, and get the king's daughter to marry, and their family's going to be free. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul the king, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine, to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said to Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, now just think about this, kids. When he arose against me, I caught him by his beard. I love that. And smote him, and slew him. He killed that old lion. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, Moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Go, and the Lord be with you. Oh, that sounded good, didn't it? Anyway, Saul armed David with his armor and put a helmet of brass upon his head. I can just see little David with all that on him. Also, he armed him with a coat of mail hanging on him heavy. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he started to go. He essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. He took off all that armor that wasn't suited to him. And he took his staff in his hand, and he chose him 5 smooth stones. Now, you know why, kids? Well, the Bible doesn't tell us, but this giant Goliath, he had 4 brothers. I'm thinking David thought, well, if I get in trouble with this one, they'll come after me. But anyway, it doesn't say that. That's just Nosy Nancy butting in. And chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in the shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on, and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, I can just imagine what he thought. He disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, which were no gods, they were handmade. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the earth, and the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, he should have paid attention, Thou comest to me with a sword and a spear and a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the God of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines. He was saying, I ain't going to stop with you. We're taking the rest of them down. This day unto the fowls of the air and the wild beasts of the field of the earth. That here's why. That all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword nor with spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose, and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted. He hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took a stone, and slang it, and smote that Philistine right in the forehead. And the stone sunk into the forehead, and the giant fell upon his face to the earth. Timber! That's the way I see that. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword. I can just imagine, man, how long that sword was, and drew it out of the sheath, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose, and shouted, and pursued the Philistines, until they come to the valley, to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Sharaim, even unto Gath, and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistines, now just imagine this, the Philistine, talking about Goliath himself, and brought it to Jerusalem. But he put his armor in the tent. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. And the king said, Inquire thou whose son that stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. I can imagine David holding this head, which was probably waist high, and just walking towards the king. And Saul said, Whose son art thou, young man? And David answered, I'm the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. I love this story, guys. Right now, Israel is in trouble. And Israel looks so small. And it looks like the whole world's going to turn against him. So Miss Nancy wants to tell you, that means that he's soon coming back for the church. Remember the gospel, that Jesus Christ died on the cross according to the scripture, was buried, and arose the third day according to the scripture. And if you believe that in your heart and you say it with your mouth, then all you have to do is call on his name to save you. And he promises he will. So when the Philistine was on one side and Israel on the other side of the valley, who showed up? Goliath, the giant from Gath. And what was he dressed like? He had a helmet of brass on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail, of 5,000 shekels of brass, and greaves of brass on his legs, target of brass between his shoulder, I imagine front and back, and a staff like a spear of a weaver's beam. Must have been like a big old timber that you'd put up in a house. And the spearhead weighed 600 shekels. What was the giant wanting? He wanted a man from Israel to come down and fight, didn't he? He said, if you beat me and mine, then we'll be your servants. No, if he got killed, he wouldn't have to serve, the people would. He said, but if we beat you, then you'll be our servants. But anyway, how did the men of Israel feel when they heard all this? They were very afraid, wasn't they? How many sons did a man named Jesse have? He had 8 sons. Which one was the youngest? A little one named David. How many of them went to war? 3. Then what did Jesse send David to do one day? He said, I want you to go, check on your brothers, take them all this food, some cheese and bread and different things. And he said, check on the war and then come back and tell me. And what did David find when he got there? The battle was in Ray, one army against the other one. They was fixing to hit it and go to battle. And then he heard something. What was he feeling? He said, what? They told him. They said, whoever kills this big giant, you ought to see him if you ever saw him. And I mean, it was all through the crowd. That man who kills him, they said, he gets riches from the king, gets to marry the king's daughter, and his family gets to go free. So David just kept asking, what? He couldn't believe what he was hearing. So, what was David's next statement about this guy? He said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that should defy the armies of the living God? And who got mad at him? Eliab, his oldest brother. And when the people heard what David was saying, who did they go and tell? King Saul, didn't he? And what did he do? Well, he sent for David. He was trying to find anybody that'd go because they was all too scared to. And when King Saul saw David, what did he say? You're just a youth. This man's been a warrior since his youth. You can't go against him. Then what did David tell King Saul about? He said, I kept my father's sheep, and there was two animals that came. What were they? A bear and a lion. And he said, I went and took a lamb out of their mouth. And he said, when that old lion started up, he said, I grabbed it, and I took it by the beard, and I slayed it. And I'll do the same to this Philistine. But when David was fixing to go to war, what did he take with him? Well, first of all, let Miss Nancy go back. What did he put on? Saul put his armor on him, didn't he? Gave him his spear, put that helmet of brass on him, that shield of the coat of mail. All that's heavy metal, guys. What did David do? He said, I ain't proved this. This don't work for me. So he took it off, didn't he? So then he went, and what did he pick up out of a brook? How many? 5 smooth stones. And he had him a shepherd's bag and a scrip, and so he took it and put it in there. What did Goliath do when he saw David? He said, what am I, a dog that you come out to fight me? You're just ruddy and you're fair and, you ain't nothing. How did David respond? He said, you come to me with a sword, a spear, and a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord. And this old giant, he said, I'll show you. And he called on his gods. He said, I'll feed your flesh to the fowls and the beasts. And what did David say? He said, no, you won't. He said, God's on my side. He's in this battle. He said, I'll show you. I'll take you, and not only you, but I'll take the rest of them. And then he proceeded to go out. And how did the battle go? David ran towards that giant when he saw him. He got that stone out of that bag, and he slung it. And what happened? Hit the giant right here. And what did the giant do? Fell down dead on his face to the ground. Then what did David do? He went and stood on the giant. He didn't have a sword in his hand, remember? He left all that stuff behind. So he pulled that giant's sword out of that sheath and whacked off that giant's head. And where did he go? He went to Jerusalem. And who saw him? King Saul did. And he asked Abner, his captain, he said, whose boy is that? Abner said, I don't know. So then Saul said, you go find out. But then he asked David, who was still carrying the giant's head, even though he put the army in his tent. His armor in the tent. But he said, I'm Jesse's son. So he was humble even after that big, big win. But thanks, guys, for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye.